Hey, y'all, and welcome back to another fire-filled segment here on GEMS Podcast. With me is my special guest, Robert Graves, and you already know me, Miss Genesis Amaris Kemp. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about Robert, and then we're going to dive into dealing with mental health struggles that Robert faced because we are in Mental Health Awareness Month currently. So here we go. Robert Graves is a successful white-collar professional by day, working as a project manager for a large multinational healthcare equipment company. Robert is an openly gay man living in Buffalo, New York. Robert's first diagnosis, chronic clinical depression, came when he was 16, even though he had been battling depression since the age of 9 when he had his first episode of self-harm ideology. As he was coming out, his depression morphed into bipolar depression disorder, which went untreated and undiagnosed until he was 44 years old. The untreated mania manifested as an anonymous sex addiction that lasted over 20 years, enduring through the height of the HIV and AIDS epidemic. Only after finally addressing his sex addiction with his therapist did his bipolar disorder come to light, and his treatment with pharmacology helped him end his addiction. With the help of ongoing therapy and careful medication management, Robert has evolved to lead a relatively quiet life in his 40s, where he enjoys boating, gardening, and volunteering in the community with various organizations such as Alzheimer's Association. He also has a cat named Bacchus and a French bulldog named Lily. Through his many years of therapy, he learned to forgive others and accept his family and friends for who they are. Now, he has turned the focus inward, y'all, forgiving himself for the reckless decision through all those years, and finally accepting himself as he is, a successful, healthy, gay man living with bipolar depression. Robert's latest book is Rob Graves, is available for pre-order on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And without further ado, the man behind it all, Robert Graves. Thank you for coming on GEMS Podcast.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, Robert. And what an incredible background. Some people may say, you don't look like what you've been through. And you may ask, well, what does somebody look like that's been through what I have? And sometimes I feel like that's a cop-out where someone doesn't know what to say, but they just say the craziest and loving that sometimes they're not. Have you felt that way?
We're having some audio issues. You were cutting in and out. I'm sorry.
So I was asking if you ever felt that way when someone just says the first thing that comes to the top of their head, not really going beyond the surface level. Have you felt like that before?
Yeah, everyone was shocked when I came out with the news that I'd be writing the book and the topic of the book. And they're like, but you don't look like you've been sick for the last 44 or for the last 22 years. I said, well, this is the face of bipolar disorder. This is the face of bipolar disorder. This is the face of mental health. And I've got a story to tell. And it's my goal to tell that story so that people realize that I'm just one in a million. And if I can get healthy, anyone can get healthy.
Absolutely. And before we dive any further, I'm definitely going to get you to share something about yourself via a rapid fire game, Robert, or the icebreaker, because it is a way for my audience to connect with you on another level outside of the topic that we're going to speak on. So Great. What are you in the mood for? A break the ice or a rapid fire 10 question game?
Let's do 10 questions.
Okay, and they're rapid fire for a reason. So, you ready?
I'm ready.
So, question number 1, if you can have dinner or lunch with any person, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh, rapid fire. I'm gonna say Hillary Clinton.
Question number 2, dream vacation.
Bora Bora.
Question number 3, what's your dream car, or do you have that dream home?
Tiny living on the beach somewhere.
Okay. Question 4, or did I say 4 already? Keep me honest here.
Nope, we're on 4.
Okay, so question 4, favorite color.
Blue.
Oh, yes, that's mine too. Question 5, if you could be a fly on the wall, Robert, and eavesdrop on any conversation, past or present, what conversation are you listening in on?
That is a good one. I would have to say a session with Dr. Freud. Any conversation with Dr. Freud.
Sigmund Freud?
Sigmund Freud, yep.
Question 6, favorite book or movie?
My book, I Robbed Graves.
What?
I had to.
Question 7, if you could go back in time and recreate any significant moment of your life, what would it be and why?
Oh, it would definitely be when my therapist asked me if I had anything else to talk about, and I told them no, when I really was struggling with my bipolar disorder and coming to terms with what that meant.
Question 8, thinking about how far you've come and progressed with, coming to terms and doing the inward work, what was the most challenging thing?
Forgiving myself for putting myself in harm's way for 22 years and not being honest with my therapist.
Question 9, are you an Apple or Android user?
Apple all the way.
And question 10, this is our pass or play question. And here are the rules. If you pass, our roles are reversed, Robert, and you get to ask me a question. If you play, I ask you one last question to conclude rapid fire. So do you want to pass or play?
I'll play.
Okay, so here we go. You can, no, rewind. I want to give you this one. You just want an all expense paid trip anywhere you want to go. And here's the kicker. For right now, they're not flying back to your home base for whatever reason. So where are you heading?
I'm going to go back to Bora Bora.
Oh, you really like Bora Bora.
Yeah. Give me the tropics anytime.
Well, thank you for playing Rapid Fire with Genesis and Robert Graves. Now we're segueing into mental health struggles. We already know that you dealt with bipolar depression and still dealing with it now, but it's managed because you took the actions that you needed to mitigate some of the things that you didn't do 22 years ago. So whenever you came to terms with realizing that you really needed help, was it out of someone telling you about it, or was it just out of you really going within yourself and realizing that there was a disconnect?
I realized there was a disconnect, and let me tell you the story. I wanted to go on PrEP, which is an anti-HIV drug, also known as Truvada, or there's a couple of name brands. But PrEP is what it's known as. And my doctor wouldn't prescribe it. And I was horrified. I'm like, wait a minute, you're my doctor. Why aren't you prescribing this for me? And he told me he didn't know enough about it. So I switched providers and I went to an LGBTQ plus medical provider that specialized in LGBTQ health. And I went for the intake, and they wanted to know how many sexual partners I had in the last 30 days. I couldn't answer it because I didn't know, because I was in such a manic state that I was really at the height of my sexual addiction. And I couldn't tell them because there had been so many. And I lost count. And it was a real awakening. And it was a real, the light bulb went off, Genesis. And I realized that if I'm gonna get healthy, then I gotta be honest. And I gotta stop lying to my providers, and I gotta stop lying to myself.
Wow. And thank you for sharing that, Robert, because that is something very vulnerable to share, but you never know how you sharing that can definitely help a listener or a viewer that's watching or listening to this segment, because the fact that you lost count goes to show that you weren't well fully.
No,
because
no.
You were just going through the emotions and trying to find a way to cope. And how many times does life happen to us where someone who may not be struggling with bipolar or sexual addiction may be going through a form of coping mechanism, and everyone has their own vice. But until you look yourself in the mirror, like MJ says, I'm looking for the man in the mirror. And I'm definitely not a singer, so y'all can feel free to laugh. You won't uncover that reality. So the fact that you realize that you had to get real with yourself, and I commend you for not just getting real with yourself, but also realizing that that previous provider that you had, you didn't have a partnership. And they didn't know how to help you. So you found someone that knew about the LGBTQ community that you're a part of, and they understood where you were coming from to get you the help that you need.
Right. I really credit Evergreen Health, which is my provider, the group that I go to, for really providing me a vehicle to get healthy. And you know, I'm doing a book. I'm doing a book reading in a couple of days, and I'm selling books, and I'm giving all of the proceeds back to Evergreen.
That is amazing. And Robert, I want to ask you a question. Since Evergreen has played a pivotal point in your life, have you thought about maybe doing a combined seminar where you bring them to a book signing, but they talk about some of the abilities and some of the perks that they could provide?
We are working through that right now, trying to get. It's during Pride, so it's a little difficult. Everyone's real busy, but we're working out the details now, trying to bring people to hand out condom packets, have the condom van out at the reading. And so we're working through some of the details and some of the logistics.
And then Pride Month is June, right?
That is correct.
And then, so with Pride Month coming up and, you know, soon, and then you working with Evergreen, and then you also having this book come out, are there any challenges that you faced since the book launch that you learned from that has helped you become more of who Robert is at the core?
I've been so blessed with just an amazing amount of support from my family, my friends. I am just beyond grateful to the outpouring of support for me and for my new life endeavors.
Amazing.
So it's been great.
That is amazing. And for you to really know who you are and what you stand for, I think that's commendable because there are so many people that are living in the shadows of someone else, or they're wearing a mask because they can't be who they were called to be. Like, for example, there may be someone else within your area that may want to come out openly as gay, or may want to say that they support the LGBTQIA plus community. I hope I didn't leave out anything there. So
You know what? I'm a bad gay. I always mess that up. So I think you're doing great.
yeah. And I think that there's unity and power whenever we can share our stories, and we can also talk about the things that we learned from and the things that we grew from. So you mentioned coming out at 9 years old. So what made you realize that you were different and you liked the same sex?
Well, I had a crush when I was 7, and that caused a lot of feelings. I had my first suicide ideation when I was 9. And part of that was because I always felt different. And part of that was I was starting to mature and realizing that I was different. But what I want to say is that at 9 years old, you really don't know what gay is. At least I didn't. I knew I felt different. I knew that I liked boys, but I didn't know what gay was. We didn't have Ellen. We didn't have any role models. Okay, this was back in the late 70s, early 80s, and we did not have any support structure or any role models. So I think it's critical. I thank Ellen for her tenacity for coming out when she did, and she's lived her life as a role model, and so many others have followed her in her footsteps. And I want to be a role model for my community, not only for the gay and lesbian community, but for those struggling with mental health issues. People with mental health issues, the suicide rates are just astronomical, both in the gay community and the community at large. And we need to stop that. We need to stop the stigma, because there's still such a stigma to mental health, and we need to change that. And that's what the goal of my book is to help end the stigma of mental health.
Absolutely, because there are people that know they need help in the mental health arena, but they don't want to be labeled as crazy or cuckoo. They don't want to be committed to a mental health or a psych ward, where they just may need, some pharmaceutical drugs to help them manage what they're dealing with, or maybe not even the pharmaceutical drugs. They may need, to just really do a root cause analysis with a paid and trained psychologist, therapists, or some of the other people that help in the mental health profession, to understand, okay, was there something traumatic that helped happen in your childhood that you've been carrying around that is leading you to have these thoughts of depression, or to have these feelings of suicide, or whatever the case may be. I'm not a trained professional in this area, but I have taken a mental health and first aid class, so I can recognize certain things based on the allergy method of how to address someone who may be on the cusp of a mental health crisis. And just because you have a mental health crisis does not mean that they're going to put you in a mental health home or facility. It just means that there's certain things that we need to get in and through you, so you could get back in balance.
Right. I unfortunately have had to have medication for most of my life, but I am a strong proponent of therapy. Talk therapy is huge, and we really need to have more providers. We need to have more access to therapy, more access to psychiatrists and psychologists, both inpatient and outpatient. And I think that's so important. I am grateful. I write about my therapist, George, who I was with for 10 years before he died. And, I dedicate the book to him. My book is dedicated to my therapist, George, because he's the one who taught me how to forgive, and he taught me how to accept myself. And those are two life lessons that are so vastly important when you're dealing with a mental health issue. You need to be able to forgive yourself, and you need to be able to accept yourself.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that George was there to help you get through that, because some people do not get that help until it's too late. And when I say it's too late, they're already checked out of here because they have done the worst. And I want to go through this ALGE method with you in case you're not familiar with it. Sure. And it's the mental health first aid. And the reason why I want to cover this is because it may be relevant for someone who is either listening to this segment or watching this segment. So they say, whenever you think about ALGE, A stands for assess the risk of suicide or harm. You're supposed to listen non-judgmentally. You give reassurance and information. You encourage appropriate professional help. And the other E is encourage self-help and other support strategies. So A is assess the risk. And when you assess the risk, you're assessing it to see, are they harm to themselves or are they harm to the people around them? And when helping a person going through a mental health crisis, it's important to look for those signs. And those signs could be some of the thoughts, their behaviors, or maybe non-suicidal self-injury. Then when you listen non-judgmentally, it may seem simple, but it's the ability to actively listen and have a meaningful conversation with that individual where they feel like they can confide in you and they don't have to put up a wall. Because how many times have somebody tried to openly share something with someone else and that person said something out of context that made that individual shut down? Mm-hmm. So that's another thing. And then the G is give reassurance and information. Individuals must recognize that mental illness are real, treatable illnesses from which people can and do recovery. When having a conversation with someone who you believe may experience symptoms of mental illness, it's important to approach the conversation with respect and dignity, and not to blame the individual for his or her symptoms. Then the first E says, encourage appropriate professional help. As I alluded earlier, and you heard me say it, Robert, I am not a paid or trained professional, but I can give some insight. It says a variety of health and behavioral health professionals and interventions can help someone who is in the crisis or may be experiencing the signs and symptoms of mental illness. And the last E, encourage self-help and other support strategies. So there are many ways individuals experiencing mental illness can contribute to their own recovery and wellness. And some strategies include exercise, relaxation, meditation, participating in peer groups, those self-help books on cognitive behavioral therapy, engaging with family, friends, faith, and other social networks. And that is what summarizes the ALGE method. Do you think if you would have had some information to that ahead of time, Robert, that it would have helped you get along with some of the things that you were facing?
Well, it's an interesting question because I've been in therapy since I was about 16. And I knew there was something else that I needed to talk about, but I was so ashamed and so afraid of what might come of it, that I chose to live the lie. So I don't know. Hindsight is 2020, and I'd like to say, yes, if I knew that, my life would have been changed. But I knew what was available to me. I had a great therapist, but I wasn't truthful, and that's the key. You have to be truthful, and without that, therapy is just utter chit chat.
That's a good thing to land the plane on, is going back to being truthful with the people that are in your life, as well as truthful with yourself, most importantly. And
absolutely.
Rob, as we begin to wind down, I want you to hold up the copy of your book so those who are watching the video can see the book that's coming out. So I, Rob Graves, hold it up straight and so I could get it in focus, and then walk us through the cover, because it looks like just the blue is calming. It kind of looks like a beach. Tell me why you picked the cover of your book.
So I wrote the book on a houseboat moored off the coast of Clearwater Beach. I lived off the grid on a boat for 10 weeks while I wrote the book. I wrote the outline primarily on a cruise, and I just had this affinity for water. So when I was working with the designer, I wanted something with water, and we landed on the cover. It's a beach. The waves represent the ups and downs of bipolar. The Graves is very manic because it's up and down. So there's a metaphor in all of this. Not only the waves, but the way the word graves is laid out. Graves is very manic, which is primarily what my life has been for the last, for the 22 years prior to getting treatment. I was in a huge mania for much of that. So the cover is very special to me. And the book is very special to me, as it would be, for anyone who wrote their story. It will make you laugh. It will make you cry. It's going to make you blush a little because I share my whole life, the good, the bad, and the ugly with my reader. And the reason I was so upfront about it is to show the reader the severity of my mania and where I came from and how I landed on my feet, and how giving examples of how one can overcome really great adversity and still be successful and land upright.
Amazing. And thank you for sharing that, Robert. And I will definitely share the link to your book in the show notes. And now we're going to head into our call to action part of the segment. What is your call to action for the audience once they just heard you speak about your book, the mental health challenges that you face, and where you are now?
If you do anything for yourself, anything at all, be honest with yourself. Be honest with your therapist, and everything else will fall into place. It was only when I was honest with my therapist did I truly get help. And, anyone can contact me on my website, www.irobgraves.com, and ask me anything. I will respond within 24 hours or try to respond within 24 hours. But there's a link where you can contact me. I just think that if I can do it, living through the HIV/AIDS crisis, coming through that HIV-negative, only by the grace of God. I thank my guardian angels. I had a team of angels around me, protecting me during the height of my addiction. And I thank God for those angels that protected me. And if I can do it, anyone can do it.
And there you have it, listeners and viewers of GEMS Podcast. You just heard my special guest, Robert Graves. All of his contact information will be in the show notes. Make sure you read, scroll down, and tap in with him. If you know anyone that is in the LGBTQIA plus community, his book would be a great gift for them. And as you know, Pride Awareness Month is coming up in June, and he is an advocate for that. So I want to challenge you to see diversity in all areas, practice inclusivity, give us a sense of equity and a sense of belonging. No matter where you came from, we all have similarities that we could focus on versus highlighting the differences. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We're on 40 plus platforms. Also, you could see all things video on our YouTube channel, which is at GEMS with Genesis Amaris Kemp. And lastly, but not least, I want to thank each one of you for tuning in on a regular and consistent basis. Because of you, we are now ranked in the top 2.5% globally out of 2.8 million podcasts per www.listennotes.com. Myself, my husband, and our community thanks you for supporting us on a consistent basis and the incredible people we bring to the platform. Until next time, peace, love, and lots of blessings.